We're back for episode 9. Is that right?
Yeah, man. I think it's about 9 so far. It's been going by so fast. Like it feels like we just started this season and it's already on 9 episodes now. It's crazy.
It is crazy. But believe it or not, we had a monster episode last week. We have the privilege of having your coach Jeff Alberts on, which was awesome. A very, very good conversation. Hope you guys learned a little bit from that. So from the training perspective and prep perspective, I think we've got a lot of insights. So, we've got newer questions coming in. He struggles a lot with the foods that he actually intakes, harder to achieve his goals. So, so this brings me to think, the world is so big, and here in Canada, it's such a multicultural city. Country. It feels like there are so many different options of diets, and everyone knows that diets have a really part in also what loss, whatever your goal is. So I think that is something that I think
For sure, man. Yeah, like it definitely the way you're brought up can definitely have a you look at your diet differently. Like, because if you're brought up and like say your parents just constantly give you fast food and stuff like that, that is gonna probably not have you eating the appropriate micros, macronutrient profiles to ensure that you're going to build muscle and stuff like that and have a good body composition. So yeah, nutrition is definitely a very huge thing. And with the different cultures, a lot of cultures, some cultures say, for example, like the Western diet, like for North America, a lot of people tend to have extremely high amounts of like saturated fat and stuff like that. Whereas with like other cultures, like maybe if you're doing like Mediterranean diet or something, you're having more fish and more vegetables and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different things that can come with culture and be related to fitness and health too.
So why don't you share with us, where you grew up and, what was, your, uh, intake and diets are like.
Nani? Yeah, so I grew up in a really small town called Sparwood. I actually essentially didn't even live in the town. I live between Sparwood and Elkford, BC. So I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys that are listening probably don't actually know where that is. It's kind of near Cranbrook. It's close to the Alberta border,
I'm gonna
kind
Google
of
it
more
right now.
south BC.
How do you spell it?
But
Sparwood?
yeah, Sparwood.
That's
It's
in
got the big
Arlington.
mining truck. Like it's famous for the world's biggest truck, but it's not really the biggest truck anymore.
Oh,
But
okay.
they still say it's the world's biggest truck. You
Sparwood.
searching it up
Oh,
right
it's
now?
south. It's southwest from Calgary.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's pretty close to Calgary. It's close to Cranbrook. It's pretty close to like Lethbridge, but it's kind of more it's in BC. But yeah, so I
It's yeah,
essentially
literally
lived
right on the verge of BC.
So I literally lived right in between Sparwood and Elkford. Like my parents owned a gravel pit business. So we were kind of out in the middle of nowhere. But my family was really into like homemade meals, especially when I was younger. Like my grandparents like hunted, my uncle and stuff hunted, so they always had like meat that they were like giving us from like either cows. Like my grandpa had a bunch of cows and stuff like that too, and chickens. So a lot of times we were getting like eggs and from those chickens. We were getting a lot of like the beef and stuff from that. So we're getting quite a bit of fresh meat that was like not very processed. But the way like my parents kind of raised me, especially the first like 5 to 10 years of life, like it was a lot of home cooked meals. And we had actually quite a bit of structure to it. I think that's one of the reasons why my eating behaviors right now are so like they're not like perfect, but they're pretty well, or I have pretty good structure to my meals. Because like when I was younger, we would always have either a fruit or vegetable in each of our meals, have either like a meat source or some sort of dairy source in each meal, and then we'd have some sort of complex like carbohydrate or something in there as well. So we actually did like my parents like had us like structure our meals quite nicely, and we were eating around the same time of the day. We'd have like a breakfast, we'd have a lunch, we'd have a dinner, usually have like a little dessert or something after the dinner meal to have that balance. But yeah, no, it was pretty good. For the majority of the time, but once we got a little bit older, once I was like 12 or 13, my mom ended up getting like a second job and stuff. So we had to cook a lot of the meals, and we didn't really know how to make a lot of the homemade stuff. So we were kind of going to the, like, when my mom would go to the grocery store and just buy stuff that's super easy to make. So you just throw in the oven, which was, yeah, a little bit more processed. Um, and a little bit more calorie dense. So we kind of went from having like homemade meals majority of the time to eating a little bit more processed food just because it was a bit more convenient. So yeah, that's kind of how things kind of transitioned when I was growing up.
So what would be like an example of from breakfast to dessert? Like what are the actual meals are? Yeah, you said like
Okay.
there's a protein, there's a fruit, there's like, but what is exactly in there?
Okay, yeah. So for breakfast, like it depends on what day it was. If it was on the weekend, we'd have something more like well made. But if it was during the week before school, we'd have some sort of cereal. Like my mom would usually try to buy the ones that were a little bit less in sugar, but eventually we got to the ones that were a little bit higher in sugar, but more so like the Cheerios, more so. I guess the mini wheats are still a little bit higher in sugar, but again, we're trying to demonize sugar in this podcast or anything like that.
Yeah.
But but yeah, like usually it was pretty low sugar, high fiber cereal. And then we'd have like some orange juice with that, and we'd have milk in the bowl. So we'd still have some sort of like dairy source. Probably not quite as much protein as we need it, but there's still some in there. And then for lunch, we would typically bring like so if I was going to school, we'd have like a sandwich with some sort of meat, some lettuce in there. I would have at least one or two like fruits that I would bring, and then usually like one or two kind of snacks like Rice Krispie squares. Or have you ever heard of fruit by the foot? Like the
No, what is
oh,
that?
okay. Yeah, they're pretty funny. Like you just like roll them out, and a lot of people would put it on their tongue and then they just try to like eat it while rolling it up or whatever.
Is
I
it
don't
is
it's
it a
hard to
candy or is it like a
it
gum?
yeah, it's pretty much like a candy. Yeah.
Oh, okay, it's a
Yeah.
candy. Okay.
But we would have, yeah, like we'd have like a granola bar or something in there. So we would have still like a little bit of protein. We'd have like a complex carbohydrate source. We'd have a serving of fruit or veggie, or like sometimes we'd have carrots in there and stuff. And then for a dinner, typically the dinner was always homemade. So again, with that, it would either be like pasta with like some sort of meat source, like lean ground beef in there, with like maybe some tomatoes cut up on the side. And then for dessert, usually it was like some sort of ice cream or some sort of like cake, like homemade cake or something like that. Um, so like it was pretty good, but then yeah, towards the when life got a little bit busier and my mom had a job, we were starting to slack a little bit more with like and just buying like different pre-cooked like chicken strips and stuff from like Overweighty. This was the store that we are shopping at the time. I'm trying to think. Yeah, we definitely made a lot of pasta. We made oh yeah, pork chops with like mashed potatoes, with like either peas or something with it. So that's kind of how our meals were kind of structured when I was younger.
Yeah, it does sound very traditional Western diet, like you've got a really good balance with all the macros. You got, really good fats, you got really good carbohydrates, good complex, as you said, really good protein. It's just, I think it's good to share, what type of meats that you were like, and there apparently I don't really hear too much seafood in your diet.
That's one thing. We actually did fish quite a bit when we were younger too. So if we'd go out on a fishing trip, a lot of times we'd bring back some fish every now and then. When we were younger, we were really good with that. But then once we got into like our teens, we didn't really end up bringing back much fish.
Mhm.
But I would say that's probably one thing we did lack on was having enough fish in our diet. We probably had fish maybe once every like 2 or 3 weeks kind of thing, but most of it was either chicken, ground beef. We'd have some steak in there. What
Pork
else did
chops,
we
you
have?
said.
Yeah, pork chops. There's probably a couple other protein sources or meats that we had in there that I just can't think of right now.
Venison, lamb,
We didn't have any lamb.
duck. I don't know.
Yeah, no duck. Yeah,
No
it was
duck.
it, it was pretty basic.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's nice and simple. I think that's I think what we're trying to promote as well is for there's a lot of food options. I think that when you were growing up covered quite a bit of it. Um, and just a side, just a side question for your if you were to have fish, how did, mom make it? Or how did you bake the fish? Because you probably
Um,
it's like nice and fresh. You're still like kind of jumping around. And you probably had to scale it and all that stuff. I don't know if I
yeah,
don't know how to
yeah.
do that, but
I remember we did that a little bit. I was pretty young at the time, so I don't remember if I think I helped a little bit with it, but it was a little bit weird to yeah, like scale it and
yeah.
cut it open, get all the guts and stuff
Yeah.
out. Like we did a little bit of that for sure. But yeah, like from with the fish, I think we would just fry it up. I don't it's yeah, it's been a long time since I've had that kind of like nice homemade fresh fish. We'd usually have deep fried fries with it too. Like my mom would cut up some potatoes, put them in the deep fryer, so we'd have like the fish and kind of chips. Um,
Nice.
yeah, that was so good.
That was good. Yeah, that sounds good, man. Homemade, hand cut fries, deep fried in their most traditional way, deep fried in hot boiling oil, and then just come up homemade, man. That's the best. Now we have like air fryers and like even like pre-cooked fried chips, and all we got to do is just put it in the oven and it's done. But yeah,
Yeah,
back then it's definitely like a really good treat. Now it brings me back to your first meal, cereal.
yeah.
Okay, this is just for fun. This is just for fun. Honestly, this is just for fun. Cereal first and then milk, or milk first and then cereal.
How we'd put it in. Um, I think we would always put the cereal in first and then milk. I remember having like the toys in the cereal box too. Like a lot of times we'd get like little toys in there or like little computer games sometimes. They would come with like oh, I can't remember the name of there was like a game that I would always play on our computer. It was like a amusement park game where you constantly build all these um amusement park things and like you try to make as much money to continue like building it bigger and bigger and bigger. I can't remember for the life of me what the game was called, but I remember always getting games or toys in like the cereal boxes too.
Okay, that's great. So same as me. I like I like cereal first and then milk. Now the thing about that is I don't like to let my cereal soak.
Yeah, me too. It gets so soggy, and I like drinking the milk after though. Like
Yeah,
if you
I will
have
do
like,
that too. Yeah, I'll
oh
do
yeah,
that too. But yeah, I don't like to soak it. I know some people like to soak it. It's just not my thing. But it sounds like you've had a really nice childhood. Mom cooks very very standard what I would call North American meals from my perspective, speaking from a different cultural background. And I'm pretty sure the majority of the older days, I think a lot of like children actually brought up actually had those meals, which I think that also kind of benefits how you're so much bigger now. You
yeah.
grew up in a eating like whole foods mainly of your life. So what would you say like eating like this has what do you think, is there any like disadvantages or things?
Um, I would say for eating like this, like since we did get quite a bit of like fruits and vegetables, like micronutrients, like it probably helped a little bit with growth and stuff and making sure that like bones are strong, putting on a good amount of size and stuff. So we definitely weren't like under eating or anything. With my family too, we all had quite fast metabolisms. So like the grocery bill I have three brothers, so the grocery bill was quite insane sometimes. So we'd have to go to like Costco once a month and just buy a lot of food in bulk and stuff to feed all of us. Cause I remember my mom always just constantly complaining about, oh man, like just spending like a lot of money each week on groceries. So, but I can't remember where I was going. Oh yeah, the negatives with this diet, like we definitely probably had more fat and probably not quite enough protein, though we did have still like at least a little bit of protein in each of the meals, probably not enough to really optimize like building muscle essentially. Um like we were probably still within like the range or like the RDA range of like how much protein you probably need per day. Like we're
0.8%,
probably
right?
just there. Um But yeah, the fat intake was probably a bit higher too than like a lot of other diets. Like with the North American diet, like we did end up eating out a little bit more frequent later on, with like having like pizza for dinner some days, having like KFC, or having like A&W and stuff like that. So there was definitely probably a bit more like saturated fat in our diets, a bit more like sugars and stuff every now and then. But my mom was really good about making sure we weren't going overboard. She would actually hide treats like candies and stuff, because we'd go to ham with them if like we knew where they were. So I remember her like even like hiding some of that good food, like the candies and stuff, in her room so we couldn't get it. But then we'd always try to sneak in and get more candies and stuff. But yeah, but yeah, in terms of any other negatives, yeah, like we probably had a bit more sugar in our diet than I would probably recommend most people would have. Um, but altogether, I've seen a lot of people's diets that were much worse. Like I remember having a friend when I lived in Sparwood, and like his diet was just ridiculous. Like the amount of like fat, amount of processed, amount of just eating out that he did was just so much different than my family. So I feel like my family did a really good job with like making sure that we're getting a decent quality diet. But yeah, I've seen a lot of other people that their diet was just like, what the hell is going on here? There's no structure, eating randomly throughout the day, having like candy every single day, drinking a lot of pop. My family was pretty good with, if we're having pop, you're just having like 1 cup of pop. So it wasn't like we were limiting anything. We were just kind of, yeah, like what I kind of preach with like my clients is just, we were kind of more so having things more so in moderation rather than obsessive amounts of it.
Yeah, it sounds like you know lived a pretty disciplined life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it reflects to how, as Jeff said, how predictable your body is once you actually know your maintenance, and then it's either you a surplus or your deficit. It's very things are very predictable for you, and you don't seem to have any problems with hitting fitness goals, or trying to reach other goals or other weight goals that you're trying to hit. And I think it also reflects too on some of your clients as well. I've spoke to Mr. Beastful. I'm not going to say his name, but he does share things that the lifestyle changes and habits that you promote in his diet or in his training. It's very similar to stuff that you're telling me right now. I think it does reflect how you're brought up, and then it's gonna how you bring those habits into your clients. I think that's a really useful tool, and I'm really happy that you're able to bring that. But it seems
Yep.
it's a pretty good diet. I wish I would be able to say the same. But me, I didn't come to North America until I was 14, 15. But then I
Okay.
was always around um, the North American culture, even though I was living back home, which was in Hong Kong. Now we know, like if you don't know where Hong Kong is, it's a very tiny little country, not a country. It's a tiny little like region south of China. Go check them out if you know go Google Map. But it's a very small place, which is very dense, and it's the most expensive place you could live in the world. It's
Great.
insane. But anyway, because there's a lot of opportunities there. It's a very dense populated place. There's a lot of other restaurants. It's almost like New York, but very small.
Interesting.
So we had a lot of different foods, but it's so different from in Chinese restaurants. If you've been to Vietnamese restaurants, that the like it's a very calorie dense food. There's a lot of flavorings. Usually there's a lot more carbohydrates compared to meat and dairy. There's meat and dairy is not a big thing here, but during when back 20, I think I can say 20 years. Yes, I can say 20 years ago when I was like, oh no, even younger than that, because 20 years I was only what 17. So no, even younger than I was already here when I was 17. So it was more than 20 years ago. Oh my God. it was more than 20 years ago when I was still growing up back home that, I lived with my parents. We can't afford living by yourself, of course. So when we lived with parents, I was fortunate enough to, be growing up with a helper at home, and they would cook whatever dad wanted to eat.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right. So mom was working. My mom was working, so she never really, took it to the kitchen. Dad is, of course, never cooks. Um, and I was just eating whatever dad wanted to eat, and so was my sister. Um, my sister being a female, and then she moved on to, I think, Australia for her further education, so that she kind of left home during late high school, and then I stayed at home until grade 9 before I moved here. So then throughout that 14 years while I was living at home, all I ever ate was what dad wanted, and dad wanted a meat, dad wanted a fish, a vegetable, and these are all like very traditional Chinese cuisine. Now, when I say Chinese cuisine, it's not the typical fried rice chow mein that you actually eat at the local Chinese restaurants here. It's more like it's either like a sweet and sour pork. Have you tried that before?
Oh, like I've had it from like the Chinese restaurants. I've never had like the original kind
Oh
of.
no, it's fairly similar.
Oh,
It's
okay.
fairly similar. So you take a piece of like very fatty pork, you deep fry it, and then you just kind of glaze it with the sweet and sour sauce. It's something similar. So it does reflect on home food, not to that kind of extent, but we usually have like a meat like that where it's either stir fried, deep fried, usually just stir fry. I would say a majority of them is stir fried, so it's got like a good amount of oil in it, and then protein profile, of course, it'll decrease after you process it. And let's say another very traditional dish you might have tried is beef and broccoli, stir fried beef and
Oh yeah,
broccoli. Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, I guess that is a closer relationship on that what my home food was sort of like.
yeah. Do you guys put MSG on a lot of your food too? Like when
I
You're happy in life, use MSG. Put MSG in everything. It'll turn it better. You just get a baby, put MSG on baby.
It's like this white powder, looks like cocaine. You just sprinkle it into your foods, right? We usually do that at home foods. We usually like put a little bit of vegetable oil at the wok, and then we start putting the vegetables. I'll just make beef and broccoli as an example, all right? So how we make it is basically we'll heat up the wok, we'll put a little bit of oil, vegetable oil, that like a really big chunk of it.
yeah.
So once it boils up, we start throwing in the meat, in the beef after marinating it. So we usually marinate the beef with a little bit of chicken powder. So it's like the chicken broth, but in the powdered form. I don't know if you've
Okay.
seen it.
But,
I think that's the closest thing to MSG that would
okay.
be. Yeah. But it's called the chicken powder, and then so we and then that's one dish.
Nice.
Yeah. So vegetables, as again, it's like the protein profile is very, very low.
Yeah.
So I grew up with foods that are very, very low in meat. And I just grew up with a lot of carbs with very calorie dense foods. So basically in a day, I might get 3 meals in. So breakfast usually like at 8:30, 8:45, and then we don't get to eat lunch about like 1, which is the leftovers. And then or sometimes on occasional, we go out with coworkers and then you have lunch outside, either sushi or more Chinese food, where those Chinese food is very similar to the local Chinese foods that you eat here, like chow mein and fried rice, that kind of food.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we get to expose to those. And then get back home, that's the same thing. But sometimes we have to work overtime. So we don't really get off at like 6. We get off like at maybe like 7:30, 8 p.m. And then by the time we get home, it's probably like 9. Sometimes we go after work. We don't necessarily go home to eat immediately. We go, happy hour with coworkers or friends. And then we might just stay up till like 9, 9:30 before we go home and actually eat that meal.
Yeah, okay. Do you find it was pretty random with like the times that you're eating, like especially like the dinner, like it would kind of fluctuate a lot when you're having? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So that's one thing about the life and living in Hong Kong that you don't really get to eat um
Did you find
on
you're like
time.
rushed to eat too? Like you're constantly feeling like you have to like quickly get food down and get back to work? Or did
Yes.
you
In the
feel
daytime, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
In the daytime, that is something for sure that you're rushing in through your food. You don't really get to like sit down and really enjoy. Sometimes that you pretty much have to, if you bring your if I you know you bring your lunch box, you bring it to you heat it up, you bring it to your desk, and then you
Yeah.
eat while you work.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Unless we go out. We go out, that's a different story.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So for the majority of the part, we're not I didn't really, get to expose myself to a lot of whole foods. It was just not available where I lived. And eating out constantly, of course, would lead to, higher cost. And then once I started oh yeah, then I came here, and of course I went back home again after 2006 to work
Right.
on my that's when I worked. And then in 2016 to 2017, that's when I actually started my first show. 2017 is when I actually did my first show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes
And so I started prep 2016. And that's when I actually had to explore where I could actually get clean whole foods. Yeah, my coach back then was a very traditional bodybuilder.
yeah.
So chicken, broccoli, and rice was his thing.
Yeah.
So that's what he had me, try and eat. So it was very difficult to find, affordable chicken breast back home. I don't know why it's like so cheap here in Canada. You can actually buy big packs of them in Costco or something, places like that, and they're so hard to find in Hong Kong. They don't sell it.
Weird.
They don't sell it. They sell very expensive ones.
Yeah.
Maybe they were talking about like almost like $10 or like $15 for just one piece.
This is one piece of chicken breast for 10, 15 bucks.
They're sort of like fresh. Yeah, they're
Oh,
sort of
okay.
like fresh. But
Okay.
still,
That's
that's
a
still
lot.
like you can't eat this. You have to like of one or two of it. Even let's say $10. If the $10 one piece, you have two pieces in a day. That's $20.
Yeah. Whereas here, like even if you go, for example, yeah, like Costco or like Walmart or something, like I think you can get like what, like 4 or 5 chicken breasts for like 10 to 12 bucks or something like that. So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
it's ridiculous. So we don't get to access, and we don't really have enough steak in Hong Kong. You know what? There's a lot of processed chicken. So what they sell a lot was chicken tenders, and those chicken
Oh,
tenders, the quality of them is it's really really bad. They still have that tendon in between the strip, so you kind of like take it out, or else you'll be chewing on that tendon for like ever. And they're frozen.
that's the worst.
Yeah, those just taste the worst. There's a lot of chicken. There's not a lot of like chicken breast in Hong Kong. There's a lot of pork.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of pork there. We can access pork easily, but pork chops don't really cut the macros very well.
Yeah, it's usually a
Um,
bit higher in fat, right?
it's
And like,
very, very high in fat.
yeah.
And knowing that we don't have a lot of cooking utensils, the kitchen theirs are small. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Forgetting about like mentioning the size of of where we live in is the kitchen sizes are usually smaller, and with a helper, they're not gonna help you cook how you want it to be. They're just gonna cook whatever dad wants to eat.
Yeah, okay.
So prepping food during around the same time area is kind of like weird. And then also in Asian cultures is a big thing for us to sit together to have dinner,
Yeah.
and everybody's eating the same thing, and then you just having your chicken breast to yourself will just make them like, what the fuck?
Will they get like offended? Like if you have your like you cook your own meal and you sit down, they're all eating the same, you're eating yours. Will they kind of get because I know
Yeah,
some cultures they don't really like that too much
yeah,
when
yeah.
you're
My culture is one of them.
Oh, okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
they don't like it because they believe in a very very traditional Chinese culture. They believe that, oh, everybody sits together in the table. That's when we actually get to meet face to face, and chat, and that's when this is family time for them.
Yeah.
So everybody wants to share the same food and bond that way. So if you have your own food, yeah, you're sitting at the same table, but apparently in their culture, it doesn't mean that to them. You're eating a different food. than what they're used to. So as you know, we just shared it, you know, cost, you know, doing bodybuilding, I'll just say do bodybuilding in Hong Kong is not very ideal. Now, I currently, you know, this generation 2023 is much better. There's more opportunities, the more different supermarkets. I wish that was there like 10, 20 years ago, but it's not. So that's where I grew up, and it was like it's still very expensive. Don't get me wrong. Trying to eat a little bit more cleaner, because everybody's difference of clean is different. You know, for us, my clean is what you eat when you grow up.
Yeah. Yeah, like that's the thing. Like, because I know, like, in terms of like the research on processed versus non-processed foods, there's not really like a lot of negative effects from processed food as long as you're controlling some variables like calories, and obviously as long as your sodium intake's not just extremely high. Like, you can still have processed food in moderation, but yeah, like, I know what you mean. Like, when you are having a lot more processed food, it's a lot more palatable. It's easier to overconsume it. It's a lot more calorie dense. So like a lot of times you need to kind of have more of it to actually feel full. So if you're mainly just eating a lot of super processed palatable foods, it's going to lead to probably some overeating over time.
Yeah. So from a, you know, from a muscle building standpoint, I would say, you know, living in with your family in Asia is maybe not so optimal. It's going to be a lot more challenging. You're going to have a lot more carbs. You probably, you know, you're going to feel, I would, people might think that you might feel energetic, but because there's so much micronutrients like sodium, as you said, like all the different stuff within the foods, how they cook it, it's actually makes me feel sluggish.
And that's the thing. Like, if you're having just a shitload of carbs all at once, especially if you don't have much fat or much protein with it, I find your blood sugar levels will ramp up and then drop. So I think that's probably where you kind of get that sluggish feeling. Whereas if you're having a nice balanced meal, usually you don't get such high ramp ups in like blood sugar levels.
Yeah. So for us, you know, weight loss, I would say it's still a thing now, in Hong Kong right now. Like, it's better, but it's still a thing that a lot of individuals will just prefer to undereat or even starve a little bit just to kind of, you know, achieve their fat loss goals. That is still a thing in their mind. It's better, you know, people are, you know, exercising a lot more. People start to understand, oh, you know, LISS is a thing. We can do that. But you know, their busy lifestyle, you know, they have all sorts of objections once you know it comes to moving, as I think anywhere else around the world as well. They'll probably
And
blame it on the weather. They'll probably blame it, I don't have enough space, but that's the thing that they'll talk about.
and with your culture too, with like the females, like, or with the women, like, isn't their like dream physique something that's usually a lot smaller than here? Like, I know, like, here people are more so like, oh, I want to put a bit more muscle, I want to have like that hourglass shape. Whereas with your culture, don't they just want to be super skinny kind of thing?
Yeah. So back then it was I think after 2 decades or a decade and a half now, the culture is better. You know, they're more exposed to different information out there on social media. They still want the skinny legs, don't get me wrong, they still want the skinny legs, but then now they'll add like, oh, I want a toned leg, or like I want the peach bum. So they want the bum to kind of stick up, but they don't want the mass of the glute max.
Yeah, I see.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we put it in like at anatomical terms, they want to build the glute medius mainly, and only the top part of the glute max. Yeah, they don't want the part that kind of sticks out, that kind of that inserts down to the hamstrings. They don't want that part.
Yeah.
It's
Interesting.
it's weird. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, we do get questions on oh, how do I build this? You know, top of the glutes. You can't.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, so that is still a thing now. Working on the back, people are a lot more aware of posture now. They're taking, you know, spine thing a lot more. It's more exposed now. People are looking at, oh, you know, I do work at desk job, you know, my head is protruding. That is like become a lot more common now. So they're training their quote unquote back a lot more now. So that's better. That wasn't a thing back then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
everybody can think about, oh, their triceps, they've got their, you know, meat swinging. They don't want that. back fat, and skinny legs. Those are like the main things. Yeah.
Okay, so it's still pretty similar to here too, because I know, especially a lot of lifestyle clients, like they don't want, the bat wings or whatever, like the little bit of body fat on like the arms. Obviously the love handles too, I find is a huge thing where people are like, oh, I don't want that there. I feel so uncomfortable with the lower abdominal fat.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like nowadays, like girls want a little bit more meat on their legs and stuff and want to have a bit more shape to like the glutes. And so it's nice to see them like change from wanting to be just super, super skinny to being at more of a healthier body fat level and being like a bit more stronger too,
Yes.
rather than being so like fragile. Yeah.
Yes, I totally agree. Like the culture is definitely better. But if we like, I just want to add one more thing for my own culture's diet. It is inevitable if your family is brought up that way. That's how they're going to raise you. It's up to you to stop the chain. It's really up to you to stop it and for you to kind of be the quote unquote outsider of the family. And I think a good approach is sourcing for different foods that it could relate so much better to the Western diet that you grew up with. It can definitely, number one, I know one thing is for a lot of guys, it could definitely help with building muscle. That's for sure. That I know. And it could even be better. It can even be even better for, losing fat as well. Just like a basic body recomp. I think it could really help.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like even just simply, increasing your protein, like anybody's diet could, or anybody from any culture could benefit just from increasing their protein a bit more. Because I find pretty much any culture don't quite get enough protein in still. Like even if they are having some meat sources in, they're either having like meat sources that are a little bit too fatty. So that's another thing I did found growing up with like I was having a lot more fatty, like really fatty meats too. It tapered towards like leaner meats towards the end, but yeah, like I find a lot of people in North America, especially if you're eating out a lot, you tend to have a lot more like kind of fatty meats, which again, red meats and everything, they're fine, and having some fatty meats in moderation is fine. It's just if you're only having like super fatty like fish or fatty like dark meat or like pork and stuff, it's going to make it harder to get your protein up without overdoing it with the calories.
Yeah, I totally agree. So what would you say is a good, a good solution for, let's say, for somebody who's prepping and they're living in my culture?
In your culture?
Yeah.
I would, definitely say make sure every single one of your meals has a good portion of protein in it, some form of lean protein. And then probably cutting back a little bit on the oils. So like making sure that you're not overdoing it with those. You can have a little bit on there, maybe like use some spray oil when you're cooking some stuff just to minimize the amount of fat that you're using. And you probably just have to bring the carbs down just a little bit, bring the protein up a bit more. And then any of the oils and stuff that you're using, bringing that down a little bit, is probably going to put you in a really good macro profile. And then for somebody that's like having the typical Western diet, it's usually just kind of bringing the fat intake down, like having leaner cuts of meat, having a bit more larger portions, like larger portion sizes of protein in your meals. Usually the carbs are pretty decent in terms of most Western diets. Like I feel like they're not usually extremely high. You may have a couple people that randomly just have a lot of chips or a lot of candy that they may have to minimize, but I find it's just usually getting protein up a little bit, bringing the fat down for the Western diet.
Yeah. So if you guys have like any other diet or cultural diets that, you want us to look into, please feel free to leave it at the comments or even DM us. We're more than happy to look at it. Like some of them are, fairly interesting. Like I would say, Mediterranean is one who said that, that could be an interesting one. Some European diets like Spanish. Oh, not Spanish. Spanish is part of Mediterranean or no? Or am I?
I'm having a brain
Yeah, I'm a brain
fart
freeze,
right
right?
now. I'm
Indian
not
cuisine
sure
is
what.
definitely one of them. Indian cuisine, I think, is actually one of the interesting ones, as well as Japanese cuisines, Korean cuisines. Those all fall
Italian.
into very similar profiles. If you guys do have any questions, then, or if you guys do have any like cultures that you guys want us to, look into or talk about, DM us or just leave it at the comments at the on the YouTube channel, or even or I don't know. Oh wait, I almost said Spotify, but Spotify doesn't let us comments. It's only a rating.
Oh, weird. I thought they. Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
interesting.
the comments I think was in Apple Podcasts or iTunes. That's where it allows us to a lot of comment. Yeah, is there anything else you wanna add to this?
Yeah, I would just say like with like the way you're brought up, like a lot of times, the habits that are kind of put into you when you were younger through like your parents and stuff, sometimes it can be hard to break those habits. So, for example, if you're younger and you didn't really have any structure to your nutrition or you're eating at random times, sometimes it can be hard to have a bit more structure, break those old habits and form new ones. Um, so I find with working with a lot of clients, like I can tell individuals that have already have really good eating habits, but then I see quite a few people with like just built-in bad eating habits, and it's just slowly transitioning them away from those old behaviors to these new behaviors, and understanding that it's going to take some time. It's not going to be like a quick fix. But yeah, and that's where like even with like eating disorders and stuff like that, I do really think a lot of that does come from people when how they were raised, how they were brought up, their relationship with food. That could be a whole another podcast talking about people's relationships with food, with culture, and all that kind of stuff too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, very, very well said. I think we shared, quite a bit of very, very good information for you. If you guys do struggle with the same, problems, please reach out. We're more than happy to help you guys. And if you guys like this episode, please leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Also, if you are on YouTube and watching us with all the nice effects that you like it, please like and subscribe to it. Again, if you have any questions, please leave it in the description below or the comments below.
See you guys.